most efficient. So let's get right down to the theory. We already talked about a constraint, and we understand what a constraint is. But let's talk about what's the theory of constraints. What about them is interesting or compelling to us? And there's a couple of assumptions that we have to agree to before we can get it. And this is true of any theory. Every theory has what are called axioms, axioms. And axioms are assumptions or things that we say in order for a theory to be considered true must be accepted as true. And that these are broken down basically into these bullet points. That first bullet point, all organizations want the same thing. We presume good intent, and we presume that all organizations want everybody in their organization and their customers and everyone in their value chain to be successful. So we assume off the bat that everybody wants to win. In other words, there's no sabotage, there's no intrigue. This is not the theory to deal with that. And the second assumption is that all organizations are measurable by these three characteristics, and that these three numbers, these three metrics, are the ones that we use to determine whether or not our theories about the theory of constraints in our organization are operable. So the first thing we have to know is, what's our inventory? In other words, what have we spent? The second thing we need to know is our throughput. How fast does what we spend become what we gain? How fast does inventory become value? And three, what's our operational expense, which is what is the cost of turning inventory into value? In the software world, inventory is our software. It only becomes valuable when a user is using it. Software that is not delivered has zero value, and we call that inventory waste in lean theory. Warren Buffett said, price is what you pay, value is what you get. We are looking for maximizing value for what we pay. So with these assumptions in place, this is the theory of constraints distilled down to its purest form. At any given time, an organization is limited in achieving its goal by one or more identifiable, measurable constraints. So let's parse this a little bit. At any given time, and that means that when we look at it, right, sometimes the observation itself depends a lot on when and how we observe something. But we say that irrespective of when you observe something, every organization is limited. And we are also asserting, as we did in our assumptions, that these are identifiable and measurable. There may be situations where constraints are not identifiable and measurable, but they fall outside the scope of the theory. And most people don't really run into those. And those are things that are, you would qualify as a disaster. The theory comes with a huge body of knowledge and some very well-tested tools to identify and kind of deal with what Eliyahu Goldratt called to break or break through a constraint. When we talk in terms of the theory of constraints, we almost inevitably find ourselves using a manufacturing metaphor. And I've gotten a little criticism for that, and I'm willing to take it. And the reason why I use a manufacturing metaphor is this is the metaphor that Dr. Goldratt used for the book, The Goal. And I think the idea of manufacturing, I think, is at least to me, and I extrapolate this out to the wide world, that the notions of manufacturing are easier to understand as a system than, for example, a complex organization that specifies, builds, and delivers software or healthcare or insurance or banking, et cetera, et cetera. So manufacturing has a sort of very kind of bucolic simplicity to it that makes it an easy target for talking about systems efficiency because of the importance of efficiency to any given system. We use value stream mapping for maximal effect. In order for us to understand a value stream, we have to be able to break it down and analyze the components, understand how it flows through a system. And we do that by looking for metrics that show the efficiency of the system. And we know that there are certain metrics that we axiomatically said we can get, and we use those to wrap around our value stream mapping. We'll talk about that in a few slides. And that's what becomes our efficiency analysis. But we always focus on the big picture of efficiency. And the reason why we talk about things like big picture and systems thinking is because time after time, it's proven that doing uh, targeted focused change frequently only changes things so locally that they don't impact an entire system. So we have to come up with the big picture and then come up with simple solutions to deal with the problems of that system's operation. And as Dr. Goldratt said, TOC is a thinking process. It's not a tool like Excel or Jira. It's a process of thinking. In other words, it's something that's done by a group of humans. It's a thinking process that enables people to invent simple solutions to complex problems. So let's talk some more about the theory. One of the great things about the theory is the ability to focus. And Goldratt talks a lot about focusing. He talks about focus as an art and says that constraints allow us to have a focal point for advancing the entire organization. In other words, it gives us something that we can talk about, something that we can rally around, something that we can socialize within our organization to attempt to bring these potential slowdown to and publicize it within the organization. As we address and deal with and break these constraints, what we find frequently is that it will expose capacity that we didn't know we had. Sometimes teams that use the theory and successfully break constraints suddenly find that where they were able to only deliver, say, X amount of software, now they can deliver 1.5 times X or 2 times X, because it's an alternative to a bigger spend, which is one of the ways that we break a constraint is by increasing flow. That, of course, means increase of cost. So we want to be very wary to try and increase flow without impacting cost too much. And also it compels us to use the inventory we have and the brain power we have and the tools we have. We don't need any special tools for using this theory. We just need our minds and a group of people who are willing to go through these exercises. When we prioritize constraints, when we say, what's the biggest constraint? We do it in one mirror, and that's the mirror of what's their impact on profitability of the company. Or another way to say it is, what's the impact on efficiency and throughput of value to our customers? Whatever is the biggest threat to your delivery is the biggest constraint. And I can tell you that the search for, discovery of, prioritizing, and breaking of constraints is not a one and done. It's an iterative, continuous, relentless process. It's something we talk about all the time together every day. And the author Bridget Riley said, focusing is not just an optical activity, it is also a mental one. So in order for us to work on constraints, we have to be able to understand them and focus on those constraints. And the way that we do that is through what's called the 5 focusing steps. We'll get to that in a moment. The first thing we do is we have to learn at least a little bit about value stream mapping. And what a value stream map is, it's a linear map, or sometimes it's collinear, but it identifies every element of process from the initiation to the delivery of elements of value in your value stream or your company. And what we do in order to apply the theory is we do a throughput analysis on all the elements of the value stream. And we calculate the cycle time for each element. And a cycle time, we calculate that by the lead time plus the execution time. The lead time is the time in between work, and the execution time is how long does it take for the work to be done. So if it takes me a week for a message to wind its way to somebody and get approved, well, that's a week of lead time. If it takes me a week to write the software, get it out the door, that's a week of execution time. My cycle time is 2 weeks. My total time to market is my sum of cycle time for my entire value stream, my entire company's value stream. Now, we think about value streams as scalable objects. We have a company's large value stream, which is made up of smaller value streams organized around solutions or products. We identify the constraints by the impact on two things that we can see. Number one, the cost of delay. In other words, anything that makes us slow to respond, anything that soaks time away from throughput increases the cost of delay. And inventory cost. In other words, the cost of the raw materials to build things or the cost of the software that we're writing and depositing on our servers. And the way that we apply it is by doing the 5 focusing steps. And we're going to go through the 5 focusing steps right now. As Peter Drucker said, efficiency is doing things right. Effectiveness is doing the right things. We want to do things right and do the right things. I've never seen it before, but there was a movie made by Goldrot called The Goal, the movie. I've never actually seen it. I believe it's for sale, but I've never actually saw it myself. I'm really looking for a copy of it. If anybody sees that, shoot me a line. I'd love to see it, but there's a famous quote from the movie. If you watch the movie or read the book, you'll know that Jonah is one of the characters in the book, and Jonah is kind of his mentor, who's a scientist that the main character goes to for advice. And one of the quotes from the movie that Jonah says is that efficiencies are not the goal of a business. Why do you think your company built your business? To show off your efficiencies? And of course, the implication is that we build a business to make money, not to be efficient.